Hello, my friends, and welcome to We the Game Changers. I'm your host, Beth Knox, and today I'm talking with Jackie Payne, founder and executive director of Galvanize USA and Galvanize Action, where she is connecting with moderate women to promote civic engagement, combat disinformation, and advance progress on key issues. In 2024, Galvanize reached over 4 million women with programming proven to diffuse the culture wars and grievance-based narratives that are being used to divide us. Jackie's innovative leadership supports women to play a role in building a thriving, multiracial democracy. From the very first time I heard Jackie speak, I knew I could learn from her and wanted to bring her into the Seattle Sports Commission community. I know you're going to love her as much as I do. Thanks for joining us for We the Game Changers. Hi, Jackie.
Hi.
So great to have you here.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Thank you.
This is, I've been really anticipating this, really looking forward to it. For our listeners, I want to just set the stage. You have been a champion in the field of gender equity for over 20 years. You've designed and ran a movement building project for the Novo Foundation, which was focused on ending violence against girls and women. You've championed reproductive justice for Planned Parenthood Federation of America. And then in 2018, you founded Galvanize USA, a judgement-free online community for women to engage about the things that matter to them. And then Galvanize Action, which provides a nonpartisan opportunity for women to grow their civic knowledge, confidence, and agency. So now your professional journey has focused on advocacy, first around economic justice and education as an attorney, and then later on reducing harm and giving more agency to women and girls. Tell us about when you first discovered your agency or how you developed that agency to do this kind of work.
You know, what comes to mind is a story from high school. It's a sports story, actually. So when I was a freshman in high school, I remember I came into the girls' locker room and I heard this group of girls harassing another girl, and they were making fun of her because of her size. And I came around the corner and she was sitting on the bench, covering herself up with her gym shirt. She had been changing, and the 3 girls were standing there really harassing her. And I ran to stand next to her. And they were scary girls. They were older and they were not nice. And so they were yelling at her and saying these things. And then I was standing with her. And so it escalated, and the gym teacher came in. And then the next thing you know, all 5 of us are in the gym, and we're all threatened with suspension because there was a 0 tolerance policy. And I was like, you know what? I'll take it. This is ridiculous. I don't agree, but I'm not going to stand by and watch this happen. And so I didn't think it was fair, but I was just motivated. I was so mad that this was happening to this girl, and I was happy to stand with her. But as a result of that, then I ended up joining the student council and tried to change the rules, So I think that was probably the beginning of motivated by standing with someone else and then seeing what more we could do to make the rules fair.
Well, it feels like that was a real tipping point. And it's so interesting when you can look back on those moments and see where it was laying the groundwork for the future. So just again, we're setting the stage here a bit. So flash forward to what led you to found Galvanize USA and Galvanize Action?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, my whole career is probably close to 30 years. That's
being generous, right?
Thank you, very generous. Has been about girls and women's equity, right? And so I was doing that work, loving it. And about a decade ago, I started to become pretty concerned with what was happening with our democracy and the rise of authoritarianism globally and in the United States. And I started to think, if things keep going the way we're going, we're not going to be able to advance any of the progress we want to see. We'll never get childcare paid for, et cetera. And so I started to pay more attention to that. I became an expert in authoritarianism and learned about the authoritarian playbook. And that really led me to try to figure out where was there an opportunity to defend this democracy and advance progress. And it ended up that the real opportunity is with moderate women because, we're such a polarized country now. there's a bunch of folks on each side who are pretty dedicated in what they think. And then there's about 50 million moderate women in the middle who aren't entrenched from a partisan standpoint, not super polarized, and are trying to figure out what they think. And I thought there is an opportunity for me to connect with them, find out what their values are, what motivates them, and what would hold them back from defending this democracy. And so we've spent the last 7 years really learning what are their values, motivations, and barriers. And that's what Galvanize Action does, all that research and learning. And then Galvanize USA has created a first of its kind digital community to really bring these women in, to be in community with them, to support them, to use their civic power to help create the progress we want to see.
You know, one of the things that resonated so strongly with me in hearing you talk about this, and I've heard you speak before, is that moment when you start to trust your own instincts, when you do a check inside, how do I really feel about this? I know that there was, part of my leadership journey is learning to really understand what those values were, and that I could trust my own instinct. I used to always question, I better check with someone else on this. And that really feels like a big part of this effort that you have been focused on, is how to help women do that check and understand that instinct. So can you speak to a little bit more of that piece of it?
Yeah, for sure. What we learned in the early days, I was the first year and a half, 2 years, I just went into middle America, in small towns in rural America, and sat with groups of women. And they would describe wanting an America just like I want, right? And then they would tell me why they're not standing up or acting to help realize it. And a lot of that was feelings of, well, I'm not smart enough when it comes to politics, or like, I don't really know how the economy works, so I can't speak to that, but my husband knows, or my father knows. And so what we heard was a lot of lack of civic agency and confidence, and a willingness to defer to others. At the time, I remember thinking how grateful I was for sports and for Girl Scouts, for like helping create a sense in myself that like I have a valuable perspective, right? Like I am what I think is valuable and worthy. And even if I'm not the smartest person in the room on something, like it still matters what I think. And so hearing women say that was, first of all, a little heartbreaking. Right. And then also, because I mean, these are women who are nurses and mothers and leaders in their communities, but when it comes to politics, they doubt themselves. So it was a little heartbreaking. And then it made me think, well, we can do something about this. Like we've seen it in sports. We've seen it in different places where we identify that there's a lack of confidence. What we know how to start to build that confidence and agency up, and to help people stand for what they believe in. And so That's been the journey, and it's been so rewarding.
Well, I know, I love that, because it's such an empowering moment when you recognize in yourself, oh, yeah, actually, I feel confident in this decision or in this instinct. So I love that you're doing that work. Now, you first studied and now employ behavioral science in your work at Galvanize Action, where there's that intersection of the neuroscience, behavioral psychology, and data science that finds women who want to progress on key issues, connects them with the values, and impacts their civic behavior. So, I just really was intrigued by that, identifying the bias, which we all have on some level, whether it's conscious or not, and then using that space around it to form new opinions. So speak to some of the ways that we can retrain our brain to be open to receiving new information and recognizing, navigating the false information or misinformation that's out there. How do we retrain our brain around those things?
So it's an uphill battle. I mean, our brains are designed to protect us, and they think protecting us is confirming what we already think. So new information it's hard for new information to get in, just in the first instance. And then in this media environment, it is so much harder, because we're in this world where, there's algorithms that are putting us down like into our own little bubbles. So getting other information that would challenge what we think, that gets us to think, oh, is this, am I just reflexively thinking this, or is this, getting that new information is hard in the first place. I think what I would say is it really is critical thinking, and being open to new ideas is a muscle that we have to exercise. And so we really have to challenge ourselves. I have to challenge myself about like, am I just watching the news I like? Am I every morning? I have a habit. So I'm like going to the same news sources. So how am I putting in alternate forms of news or different perspectives into my sort of media diet, so I can really think, is what I think correct? Am I challenging myself? And am I open to new ideas? And I think it's hard to do, but it's doable. And I think for anyone who's listening, who's thinking less about like, how do they get themselves to open to new ideas, but they're like, how do I get my, cousin to do it?
Right.
I would say, there's things we know about how to help other people be open to new ideas. So what you don't want to do is fact battle. That is our instinct. As soon as we hear someone disagrees with us, we're like, let me tell you the 18 things I know that why you're wrong. But the brain doesn't work that way. The brain works with its emotion leads to feelings lead to perspectives and opinions. And then the brain's like, let me go find some facts to back up this perspective and opinion, right? So if you're starting at a fact battle, it's like the tail wagging the dog. That's like a useless use of your energy. Instead, start in the emotions and the feelings part. Really talk to your cousin about like, what's going on with you? Why do you feel that way? Why is this important to you? Listen to their values.
Right.
What are they saying? What's underneath the arguments they're making? Are they afraid? Is it they want it to be fair and they don't think it's fair? Like, listen to those values. Meet them there with curiosity, and then that starts to open up all kinds of possibility. Because if people feel seen and heard and not judged, we lower our defenses,
right,
and we're much more likely to be open to being curious, critical thinking, exploring alternative ways of thinking. So
those are great action items, especially. It just really resonated when you said how I think we're conditioned to go to where it's comfortable and familiar. I mean, we have so many things that we're bombarded with on a daily basis, and falling into that muscle memory habit of just going to the news that I know and feel comfortable with. I think that's a really great reminder that doesn't actually help us in the long run. So I love those are great action items, both of those. Okay, so now your team has won awards for its research. In 2024, you did a massive study that tracked the influence of messaging through all kinds of communication. Can you tell us about that study, and then what were some of your biggest takeaways and how people are influenced through messaging?
I'm so proud of that. Our team got another award.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's awesome. We have an amazing research team. Our goal is to support women to use their civic power to defend democracy and advance progress. And once we do all this research to figure out what matters most to them and how to connect with them, we test messages, we create programming and mostly digital programming to connect with them and see if we can get them to stand up, right? Take action that will help us move forward. And so that's really what the research was testing. If we expose folks to our messaging and programming, are they more likely to take action? Are they more likely to stand up? And what that study was, I think, a 6,000 person study. 3,000 of them saw our programming over a course of several months. 3,000 did not. That's the control. And what we saw was over that course of time, we really significantly influenced their perspectives and their willingness to stand up. And so for me, that's like super exciting, because my whole goal is to get these moderate women to say like, hey, wait a minute. And the award we got was on our economy research and messaging, and because that's the number one issue for moderate women. So after watching our programming, they were like, hey, wait a minute, my family does deserve more. This isn't working out for me. I want something else. Government should help me more in this way. And they felt more willing to stand up to ask government for what they deserved, as opposed to sit back and just be upset about it, right?
Oh, okay, that's great. And that leads me to another question, and going back to what we referenced earlier about misinformation or false information. What is our role as individuals, whether as a leader or a team member, in communication, when we are working in an environment, in our business environment, or even in our community? What is our role as communicators as it relates to that?
It's probably both about how we understand the audience we're talking to and then how we approach them. So I think understanding the audience is first and foremost. People are receiving information that you're trying to share with them not in a vacuum, right? In their life experience. So like what's going on for them? What are their values? What motivates them? And then what's going to get in the way of them hearing you and acting on what you're saying? So I think about that all the time. I think about that even with my team. I'm like, I want to introduce this new idea. Like, how do I meet them at our shared values on this? What's going to get in the way with them wanting to do it, right? So that kind of approach to really thinking through your audience, where they're coming from, what they need, helps you connect with them. And then I think being able to meet them where they are is also important. So for me, what that means right now is there's a real shift in the media consumption and news consumption. I mean, I'm so delighted that you're doing a podcast, right? It's so great because you and I remember when there was like 3 news channels and everybody was watching the same news, and you didn't change the channel because you had to get up to do it, right? And now it's not like that anymore. And in today's environment, there's a news avoidance. So people are feeling like this is so chaotic. I don't even want to hear what you have to say. I want to get some, it doesn't feel like it's not good for my mental health. So people are starting to turn off and they're looking for entertainment and relief from the news. But for me, that's a challenge because I need to talk to them about this democracy. Our democracy is a team sport. We need everyone participating. So it's not, I can't have them check out, but I can't, lecture them and say, come watch the news. What I do is say, well, where are they going? They're watching YouTube shows or they're listening to these podcasts. How can I go there and talk to them? And so really meeting people where they are, whatever that looks like for you as a leader or as a communicator, is super important.
Right. I love that. Okay. Thank you. I want to talk about othering. So Galvanize Action focuses on ways to reduce othering, which is something that I imagine we've all done, again, whether unconsciously or not. Can you explain what othering is? And then how can someone's leadership journey benefit when we evolve away from this mindset?
So you can think of othering as a situation where we're creating an us versus them, right? So in a democracy context, we see authoritarians use othering. They create a fear or threat of the other. And that's kind of scapegoats the other. And then we say to us, like, look, we need to do something about them. And so what the us does is sit by and watch as we erode democratic norms and ideals to take care of the threat of them, right? And so it's a way to increase sort of authoritarian power and to erode democratic norms and ideals by creating this threat of the other. That is kind of how I first learned about it. And I was thinking, what am I going to do about this? But in regular humans' lives, like how does a normal leader, how does this affect you? Think about all of the ways that we've all participated in us versus them. When I was just thinking about, I have a teenage daughter. How does that happen? But also, like if you're a coach or a leader, what we try to do is create belonging, right? What we're trying to do is bring people in because we understand that we move at the speed of trust, right? We need people to feel like we're in this together, we have each other's backs. And in those conditions, when you feel safe enough, you will take risks and you let everybody in the system bring their full talents and strengths. When we create this fear and threat, and then people shut down and then they don't feel safe, and then they may, just stop contributing altogether. And so think of othering as kind of the opposite of belonging. And so as a leader, what I constantly am trying to do is create the conditions for people to feel like they are on the same team. And that's both true like in my organization, but also in our democracy. We are in this together. We are on the same team, and we need all of us to pitch in and contribute.
Well, I love that because it feels, my brain is just going to all the ways that we can even in minor ways. There's another organization that we're working with that is challenging, or an individual, and creating that us and them, the language around that. It's so tempting to go there, but I love finding ways to reduce that and bring in that together mindset. Now, Jackie, you're a firm believer in the ability of sports to develop confident leaders and unite communities, and how it overlaps with democracy, especially in your work. What is your personal story with sports? What sports did you play? Where did sports show up in your life before you're coaching your daughter's soccer team, right?
Mm-hmm. So I'm a Midwestern girl. I grew up in Chicago. If anyone remembers the 1985 Bears,
Yes.
the Super Bowl shuffle, in 1985 I kept like a scrapbook of all the news. I was very into the Bears, and then I played soccer from like K through 12, and then I also did track and volleyball, but really soccer was my sport. I really am a believer in the value of sports, especially for girls, but really for all of us, in terms of building up that confidence and sense of individual value, and the teamwork part of it. So I think those two things together, I am confident, I am a valuable contributor, and it takes all of us. That is what makes a good citizenry, right? So I wish everyone was in sports in some way.
Yeah, no, I think that's so true. And I love how it can impact, especially young girls. And when I see them coming into the world with this confidence and, just feeling like they do have that agency, because we all have struggled with that at some point. So to be able to see that in them is just very remarkable. Now, Jackie, you delivered a very inspiring keynote speech to last year's Women in Leadership Breakfast that was produced by the Seattle Sports Commission. And I'd love to dive into a piece of your overall message that you gave, where you shared a story of a young girl that you coached on your daughter's soccer team who was terrified to play soccer. And you said, I'm quoting, Sophie didn't need any more dribbling drills or to run plays again. What she needed was a space to voice her fears and to have a safe place to face them head on. And through that encouragement, Sophie flourished on the soccer pitch. So I know that as leaders, we are also we shape and influence our team's workplace, an environment. Your young player Sophie is such a great example of what can happen when we're given that license to build and cultivate the confidence. So, in what ways do you see methods used to help Sophie gain confidence being useful to people in that professional setting?
I love what you just said about cultivating confidence. I do think that's a lot of it. I think that as leaders, what we're charged with is creating the conditions to really bring folks together and let their talents flourish, right? And so what do you need to do to create the conditions for that? I think in the Sophie story, she was so terrified of failure and letting the team down, and she didn't want to try. And so part of it was de-risking failure, right? And so saying like, this is practice, it's okay, it's fine. And like creating an environment where people would say, it's okay to try and fail, doesn't matter. And we would get her to take some risks and not say, well, she really isn't very good at that position, so let's not put her in ever, right? I didn't put her in that position in the game to start. Neither one of us wanted that, right?
Right.
Honestly, but I did want her to at least try everything and give it a shot and experience what it meant to give it a shot. And by the end, she moved from, she wanted to be in the very back. So she would move her way up. By the end, she wanted her shot on goal, and she was so proud of herself when she took the shot. And I remember once when she scored, it was such an amazing experience to watch that her, in that moment, to have gone from someone who was afraid to kick it to, getting that goal. And what that is about creating the conditions to say you are not your failures. You are that all of us failing. Someone once told me failing is a first attempt in learning. And I really like that. So it's like, it's de-risk it, ask people to try, create the conditions to support them, then let them practice, give them a chance to practice. And if they do fail, even in the games, it's okay. We're on our journey together. But set them up so that they have the ability to succeed, right? And part of that was the one-on-one with Sophie or with teammates. And part of that is creating a team culture that we all know what we're doing here, right? Someone's trying something out. They're taking a risk, support the risk, right? In my organization, we talk a lot about distributing leadership. So how do we, if it is not just all one person at the top making all the decisions, how do we really think about what does it take to distribute authority, distribute leadership? What does someone need to be set up for success in that? How are we aligned on where we're going, what the mission is, what the key points are, and then how do we give them a lot of chances to take that ownership and lead?
Well, I love that. I remember one of my early mentors had explained to me that the fear that I was feeling is a result of not having tried it. And, connecting I've never done that before. That's why I'm having this feeling. And that even just doing it once alleviates some of that fear. And, thinking about it in that way, especially when you are young and coming into the workplace and you're being asked to take on a new challenge or a new responsibility. And that has been such it's that lead-in kind of mindset to that what's uncomfortable and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. So I think there are so many opportunities for us to help the people on our team feel that uncomfortable role and be okay with it.
Yeah, and just having a growth mindset culture, right? So I'm not okay. I'm not good at this yet. Of course you're not good at it yet. You haven't done it that many times. How many times did it take to get good at it?
Exactly.
So I was thinking about my son and I were just watching the NBA finals. And so we were watching all the free throws. And I was thinking like, how many times do you have to practice that to get to the place where you're, at 70% or 90%, some of them, Steph Curry.
Right.
And so Steph Curry has every reason to believe he's going to hit that, and so, but for the rest of us, like until you practice it enough, like that's how you build the confidence to stand up there and feel like I'm going to be able to do this. Right. And even Steph Curry doesn't make it 1 out of 10 times. And that's life, right? We cannot be perfect.
Yeah, right. Well, to expand on that further, in your work with understanding and empowering civic engagement among women across the country, I've heard you talk about the common thread of women dialing themselves down or disengaging from conversations that are veering into the conflict territory. And you observed some very telltale body language in this process. Can you speak to that and how we can integrate that into our daily interactions with people?
So one thing we saw was women smoothing out the tablecloth. They just wanted to iron out the wrinkles. They didn't want any conflict. The other thing we saw was they described how they would say, how when you feel like you know something and you start to say it and then someone comes at you and kind of shakes their finger right in your face and they say it with such confidence that even though you're pretty positive you're right, you start to back up and you think, I don't know, maybe I'm not right.
You question.
And you question yourself. And women room after room after room, I saw that finger shake and women visibly, as they were telling me the story, leaning backwards and start to essentially give up on it, right? Because they were avoiding from the conflict, the possibility of being wrong. And they just were, in a really positive way, open to the possibility that they were wrong. They had the humility to think, wait, maybe I'm wrong, but also the lack of confidence to say, wait a minute, I know I'm right.
Do you have suggestions on if we find ourselves doing the kind of the proverbial smoothing the tablecloth in those moments, how do we pull ourselves out of that?
Well, mostly it comes, so that the example I gave is an example where I just did it vis-a-vis someone that I respect in my life. And mostly what we see in the stories of our audience is that it's women vis-a-vis their husbands or fathers or pastors, right? And it comes from number one, some self-doubt, and number two, usually a healthy respect for the other person in their life where they think, well, he does know more than I do, and so I'll defer to him. So what I would say is, in that moment, for all of us, step back, remind yourself that you are an expert in your own life. You do know what you know, and you certainly know how you feel and what you value. And for almost everything we're talking about, you don't have to be an expert in whatever the topic is, in the economy, in foreign affairs, whatever, right?
Right.
You have to be an expert in what matters to me. What do I value? What do I think is right and wrong? And therefore, what's my choice? That's not something that anyone else really has any business in. They can do what's good for them. You
Right.
need to be clear on your own values, sense of right and wrong, and what you think is best, and then trust yourself there.
Yes, that's so great. So, the hope for anyone who's struggling with that confidence is to, one, know and trust their own values, as we've talked about, and to not filter them through someone else's lens as a means to avoid that conflict. So from your experience and years of working in this space, what is your advice for those emerging leaders of all types, whether they're quiet leaders, the future leaders, the outspoken ones? How do we think about this from a leadership standpoint and getting beyond the barriers and listening to our gut? Like, what is that process based on, again, the kind of the scientific data that and research that you've done?
So I would say that what helps me is I'm super clear on my mission. I know what I'm trying to accomplish. So in the big picture, what my mission is of my organizations, what purpose, what I'm going after, that understanding the why for me in any setting helps me clarify. What am I doing here? Why am I doing it? And I have thought about it. I have a reason for it. I'm clear in my own purpose and mission. And so then I can stand in that. That helps a lot. I think the other thing is I don't do it alone. So I talk with my team about what is the mission. We're discussing it together. I'm not relying only on my own opinion. I do have a cadre of women who are with me thinking about this. It's our collective wisdom that helps us think this thing. And so then if I ever have self-doubt, like in that moment, in that last story, I call the team together and we come together. And so just like in sports, like it is having a team around you is so helpful. Having a group of friends or other leaders say like, you got this. Like that is an important part of it. You don't have to do it all by yourself. The work you can do for yourself is clarity around what is my why? What am I going after? Why am I going after it? Why do I think this is a valuable activity? Ground yourself in your reason and then share it with friends and colleagues and they can have your back and boost you up.
Well, that's so true. And that having your back, because I found that sometimes a colleague or a friend will say, no, what I hear in you is that you're saying this. And having that validated, especially when you start to question, am I the crazy one here, or am I not in tune with my North Star, to have somebody else feeding that back that you can trust. I think that helps validate what you are feeling.
And the social science is there. I mean, I come to that from neuroscience and behavioral psychology. That's actually when we're not sure what to do, the first thing we do is look to people around us, right? Like, and that's a throughout history, that's how we evolve as humans.
Human
like,
behavior.
Is this a safe thing?
Right.
Is this going to go well for me? Like, what is everyone else doing? So we're looking to what does our group around us say, and what we're looking for is social proof. So creating the conditions that you're getting social proof is saying, hey friends, I'm going to do this thing, have my back, right? And then in our program that we create, that's why we created a digital community. So in the last 2 years, we've had 680,000 women subscribe to be part of this community. 1,500 women join every day to be part of it.
Amazing.
And they stay. And the reason they're staying is it's an environment where they can think about what they think and they can share it in a pretty judgment-free environment. And other women, they're like, yeah, I agree with you. And once we hear, oh, I agree with you, I also feel that way, I also did that thing, then we're like, yeah, I'm not alone, right? Not being alone is a big part of the solution.
It absolutely is. And it's a great segue to what I keep thinking about here is, and you've shared a few examples of the pushback when someone disagrees or says that you are wrong, all of those things. What's your advice on staying grounded in our values in the face of that pushback? What comes to mind to me is we move so fast in our lives right now that I almost need to have it's like the alarm on your watch to say, okay, wait, what is my North Star again today? Remind myself, because it's so easy to lose track of that in the busyness. What are suggestions do you have?
Yeah, I mean, the North Star piece is, I'm with you totally. We have a North Star at our organization. We are constantly updating it and saying, are we all on the same page? Do we see where we're headed? And why do we do that for the team is to say, what is our mission? What is our unique value add? What is our role here? And how are we moving towards that North Star? If you have that clarity, people can and will come at you with either, helpful advice about how they want you to expand or do this other thing, or critique of what you're doing. And so with that clarity, it creates some opportunity for me to say, let me open myself to your feedback. I do want to hear it. Like, have you seen something I can't see? So I can be, because I have that clarity, I can be pretty open. And then I can say, that's an interesting idea. It's for someone else because that doesn't fit with our understanding of where we're headed and why and what our unique value add is. So it allows me to be open, which I think is super important as a leader, to be adaptive, to be open, to hear what you're missing, to evaluate that so you don't miss any opportunities, but also then to discard the information that isn't in line with your North Star and to be able to let that go. I think that has been super helpful to me.
Oh, I love that. That makes sense. So we're going to wrap up here, Jackie, but we have what we call our game changer quick hits.
Okay.
So things that I want to make sure I learn from every guest that we have on this podcast. Who has changed the game for you the most, either personally or professionally? There's so many game changers in our worlds. Who influenced you from a game changer perspective?
Can I give you two?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to offer Patsy Mink and RBG. So Patsy Mink, representative from Hawaii, first woman of color elected to Congress. And you all may know her as the author of Title IX. So I worked super closely with her office when I lived in DC, and I was working on policies for low-income women. She was an amazing advocate for low-income women, and in addition to obviously women in sports.
Right.
So I worked really closely with her, and it was just a fantastic learning opportunity to kind of be at her knee and learn from her. And when she passed, her family asked me to be a trustee of her foundation. So it's been 20 years now, and the same 6 of us have been the trustees of that foundation in the last 20 years. And so that's been a total honor. And then I think RBG, like I am a lawyer. I was sworn into the United States Supreme Court, and RBG was sitting there on the Supreme Court. And to be able to have been sworn in front of her, I was so aware of what a trailblazer she was for women. And not only, because she's this incredible legal mind, but also her story is the story of taking care of family, taking care of self, and taking care of business. So like when I think about her story of like when her husband was sick and she was doing just, if you haven't watched her documentary, watch it. Like she's a mother, a caring partner, an amazing legal mind, and she didn't balance work and family, but she showed us how you could be purposeful in all realms of your life, and then also to stand up for women's rights and freedoms, and to be such a staunch advocate for that. I definitely stand on her shoulders.
Those are great. And, when you mentioned the Title IX piece, someone that comes to mind, and I have to have her on the podcast, is a woman named Trish Bostrom here in Seattle. And she played tennis at University of Washington. This was pre-Title IX, of course. And she was a very talented tennis player, but of course, especially back then, the inequities between travel and the equipment, all of those things, they were so disparate. And it was her father that encouraged her to sue the University of Washington, and she did, and it resulted in a settlement. And UW made changes. And that was the precursor to Title IX. And Trish was really one of those individuals willing to risk so much and go to, those are the shoulders that we stand on completely. Well, thank you for sharing that. And my last question is, being a game changer at its core, as we know, is disruptive. We are disrupting the system, which of course can bring on resistance or criticism from those around you. And it's easy to feel isolated in that moment if no one is supporting your vision. What is your advice to someone who is swimming upstream and feeling like they are fighting alone? What would be your guidance to those folks?
Okay, maybe it's 3 parts.
All right.
See. The first part, so being a disruptor, first of all, know your why. So get really clear on if you're disrupting something, it's because you've said something is not working. And I think there is a need for something else. That's the virtue of being a disruptor, right? So know your why. What is the thing you're trying to tackle? What's the hole you're filling? And then go for it. Number 2 is remember that if it's not working, it's because no one else has already done it, right? Like in a world where if you're following what other people are doing, then by all means, learn from them, get behind them, get smarter and smarter following those footsteps. If you're disrupting because there's a gap. There is, by definition, no one has done what you need to do. So no one can tell you you're doing it wrong. And if not you, who? So go try it. Like you're filling a gap. I find that as a innovator and entrepreneur, I find that to be the freest space. No one else has done it. So you're not wrong. And even if you fail, it's the first attempt at learning. Well, I just helped everyone see not to do that. Let's do the next thing, right? So that's 1 and 2. Know your why. Take up the space. I think the notion of it's lonely at the top is antiquated. It comes from a time where we saw leaders as individual leaders, and we had a very male and sort of singular vision of what leadership is. I think the way that we're leading now is leading through collaboration, right? Building that community, having each other's back, to say I know my role here and I see your role here and your role here and your role here, just like on a team, right? We all play different positions and none of us is going to win alone. So we win together. And I feel like if you lead that way inside your organization and across organizations, that understanding that, that old African saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We want to go far. We're in this together. So I never feel alone, even though what I'm doing is unique. There is no one else doing exactly what I'm doing. I'm intentionally on the cutting edge of neuroscience and behavioral psych and data. I'm intentionally on that cutting edge, but I'm not alone. I'm in the great ecosystem of other women leaders. And an example of that is I never go into a funder meeting without knowing who else I would recommend they give to besides me, right? We lift all boats. And that, if you lead that way, you'll never feel alone.
That's fantastic. You are so inspiring. Thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Likewise. You're making Seattle awesome, and I'm so happy that you're here doing this work.
Well, it's fun working together and finding ways for our paths to intersect and share audiences, because I do think that the work that we're really attempting to do here is for the betterment of our community, our region, our country, all of that. So thank you for making time to be part of We the Game Changers and for sharing all of your wisdom with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, great. Thank you. Thanks for joining us for our launch season of We the Game Changers. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your content. And please share this with your network. Encourage someone else to explore their leadership journey and get inspired by game changers of every kind. This season, we'll be talking with executive chefs, professional athletes, founders, and more, each with their own unique leadership voices. From confident public speakers to introverted role models. Wherever you are in your leadership journey, all are welcome. Follow along on Seattle Sports Commission's social media and join us for our next episode.